He couldn't see her face, but he held onto her voice to stay alive. A night, a hospital, a car crash that split life into before and after. Scarlet, a nurse who stays when everyone else leaves. Alexander, a man suspended between breath and silence. She talks to him, even when he can't respond. He survives, without knowing why. But what happens when he opens his eyes and finally sees her? Can a love born in a hospital room survive real life? This is a story about second chances. About a touch that brings you back to the world. About a love that begins in pain, and becomes home.
Love Stories Max. Welcome to my channel. Enjoy watching, friends.
Between life and love. The night they brought Alexander in smelled like rain and antiseptic. I was on my 12th hour of a night shift, sipping cold coffee so I wouldn't fall asleep, watching raindrops slide slowly down the window of the emergency department. The hospital was never truly quiet, but that night had a strange, heavy stillness. The kind that presses against your chest. Then the siren cut through everything. Severe trauma, car accident, massive blood loss, the doctor said quickly. They rushed the gurney down the corridor, and that was the first moment I saw him. His face was pale, bruised, a thin line of blood running along his temple. Dark hair stuck to his forehead. His breathing was uneven, shallow, like his body was negotiating with the world for every next second. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his life. But something inside me tightened sharply, not fear, not pity. Just one clear thought: he has to survive. I held his hand while the doctors worked. My fingers were warm. His were cold. Too cold. "You're not alone," I whispered, mostly to myself. "I'm here." He couldn't hear me, but I hoped, somehow, he could feel it. The days after the surgery were the hardest. Alexander lay unconscious, connected to machines that filled the room with steady beeps and mechanical breathing. I volunteered for extra shifts in his room. I adjusted his blanket, wiped his forehead, changed his bandages with a tenderness that surprised even me. As if he were already someone important. I talked to him. About small things. About the weather. About the chestnut trees blooming outside the hospital. About my favorite bergamot tea. "You'd like it," I smiled softly. "It smells like calm." One night, while I was speaking, I noticed his fingers move, just barely. It could have been nothing, a reflex, but to me, it felt like a promise. He woke up early in the morning. The sky outside the window was pale gray when I was adjusting his IV. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice rough and fragile. I froze, then smiled so hard my chest ached. "You're in the hospital," I said gently. "You were in an accident. But you're safe now." "Who are you?" "I'm Scarlet. I'm a nurse. And I've been here the whole time." He looked at me as if trying to memorize my face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I heard you, even when I couldn't answer." My throat tightened. I had to look away for a second. Days blurred together. He learned how to sit up again. How to stand. How to take his first shaky steps. He hated how weak his body felt. I held his arm when he walked, joked when he got angry, stayed silent beside him when words felt too small. He learned that I'm afraid of thunderstorms, but still love the rain. I learned that he always dreamed of traveling, and always postponed it, for later. He gave me crooked smiles instead of flowers. I brought him an extra pillow, for comfort, even though the real reason was simple. I wanted to stay longer. One evening, when the hospital finally grew quiet, he said, "I don't know what would have happened to me without you." "You were strong," I replied. "No," he shook his head. "I was alive because you stayed." When he was discharged, I stood by the corridor window watching him walk slowly toward the exit. I told myself this was the end, a beautiful, painful ending. Then he stopped, turned around. "Scarlet, yes? I'm not ready to say goodbye." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, my handwriting, my number. He held it carefully, like something fragile and priceless. "Let me take you on a real date," he said. "No hospital walls. No IVs. We met at a small cafe by the river." He arrived early and was nervous in a way that made him look younger. I wore a light dress, and when he saw me, he couldn't look away. We laughed. We sat in comfortable silence. We shared a dessert and warmth beneath the table when his hand found mine. I didn't pull away. "You know," he said softly, "I think I survived to find you." "And I whispered, "worked that night so you would stay." The streetlights flickered on over the river. There were no hospital walls between us anymore. No fear, no pain, just love, born in the quiet of a hospital room, and grown into something real, gentle, and alive. We started seeing each other often, as if we were afraid of losing time again. Alexander told me about the accident one quiet evening. We were sitting on the floor of his apartment, drinking tea from mismatched cups. He still didn't own a pair. Rain tapped softly against the window, just like it had that night. He was a structural engineer, designing bridges for a living. A man who spent his life creating safe crossings, without realizing how close he himself had come to the edge. "I was driving home late," he said, "thinking about deadlines, about another vacation postponed. The light was green, and then there was impact. And silence." He remembered fragments. Cold air, shattered glass, the smell of gasoline. And a voice. "You were talking to me," he said quietly. "I couldn't see you, but I held on to your voice." I took his hand and didn't say anything. Recovery was slow, and I stayed, not as a nurse anymore, but as a woman who wanted to say good morning to the same person every day. We made simple breakfasts. He burned the toast. I laughed. He started sketching bridges again, not for work, but for himself. I sat beside him on the couch, reading, occasionally looking up just to make sure he was there. Alive. A few months later, a dog entered our life. Small, ginger-colored, with a face far too serious for his size. We adopted him from a shelter. Alexander said, "If he survived that place, and I survived the crash, then we're the same kind of stubborn." We named him Lucas. Evenings became sacred. We went for walks. Me wrapped in his sweater, him holding the leash. Lucas ran ahead, stopped, waited for us, as if making sure we were keeping up with life. We talked about everything and nothing. About fears that no longer felt so heavy. About future trips we promised not to postpone anymore. Sometimes we walked in silence, side by side, and it was enough. One night, he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, pulled me close, and whispered, "You became my home after I almost lost it." I leaned into him and realized something simple and true. Love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, through hospital corridors, through pain, through second chances, and then it stays forever. Our first kiss didn't happen right away. There was so much tenderness between us that we were almost afraid to rush it, afraid of breaking something rare. That evening, we walked longer than usual. Lucas ran ahead, stopping now and then to look back at us, as if making sure we were still choosing each other. The air was warm, scented with wet pavement and evening flowers. We stopped by the river. The water moved slowly, catching the glow of the streetlights. "I think about that night a lot," Alexander said. "About how close I was to never meeting you." I looked at him, without fear now. Without hospital walls between us. And I think about how strangely love finds us when we're not looking for it. He cupped my face in his hands, gently, like I was something fragile and precious. Our foreheads touched. "May I?" he whispered. I nodded. His kiss was quiet, slow, warm. There was no urgency in it, only a promise. Something inside me finally settled, like it had found its place. We kissed many times after that, but that first one stayed the softest of all. A year passed. We lived together, our home filled with the smell of coffee, dog hair from Lucas, and a deep sense of calm. Alexander returned fully to work, designing a new bridge he called his second chance project. One evening, he suggested a walk without Lucas. "We need a little silence," he said with a smile that felt different. We went back to the same spot by the river. "Scarlet," he said, "you were there when I couldn't breathe on my own. You became my light when everything else disappeared." He dropped to one knee. My breath caught. "Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, perfect. I laughed through tears. "Yes," I said softly. "You already know it's yes." He kissed me, and the world became quiet and right once again. Love sometimes begins in pain. But real love always ends in home. Our wedding wasn't loud. It was real. We got married by the river. The same place where we once stood under streetlights, holding hands, unaware that our forever had already begun. The morning was warm, the sky soft, as if it had been gentled just for us. I walked toward him slowly. In a simple dress, with a heart that beat calmly, without fear for the first time. Alexander looked at me as if every step of his journey, the pain, the hospital, the silence after the crash, had existed only to bring him here. Lucas sat nearby with a small bow tied to his collar, looking solemn, as if he had taken responsibility for the day. "I promise," Alexander said, holding my hands, to protect you the way you protected me when I couldn't do it myself. And I promise," I said softly, "to be your home in every kind of weather." We didn't swear eternity. We swore everyday life. Mornings. Care. A love that stays. When he kissed me, I knew I wasn't rushing anymore. I had arrived. A year later, our home smelled like coffee, fresh bread, and warmth. Alexander worked on a bridge, officially called something else, but to us it would always be the Second Life Bridge. Sometimes he showed me the blueprints. I didn't understand most of the lines, but I always understood his eyes. Calm, certain, alive. I no longer feared night shifts. I knew someone was waiting for me at home. We still took evening walks with Lucas. Now he walked between us, occasionally nudging our hands with his nose, as if checking, "You're still together, right?" One evening, wrapped in a blanket by the window, I felt Alexander's arms around me from behind. "Are you happy?" he asked. I leaned into him. "I'm home," I answered. Love doesn't always change life dramatically. Sometimes it simply makes it right. And that is enough. Sometimes I think about how strangely life works. It doesn't ask if we're ready. It simply brings us where we're meant to be. I still remember that hospital corridor. The cold floor. The lights that never turn off. And the man lying somewhere between life and silence, unaware that he would become my entire universe. Years have passed. Our mornings are slow now. I wake first, make coffee, open the window. Alexander comes up behind me and wraps his arms around me without a word, not out of passion, but out of knowing. Lucas sleeps at our feet, calm and content. There is a lot of quiet in our home. But it isn't empty quiet. It's the kind where nothing needs to be proven. Sometimes, at night, Alexander wakes suddenly. The accident still finds him in his dreams. The impact, the moment the world disappeared. I touch his shoulder, and he comes back to me, back to now. "I'm here," I whisper. "I know," he says. "You always are." He finished the bridge. We went to see it together. I stood beside him, watching cars cross it slowly, unaware that once someone almost didn't make it to the other side. "This isn't just a bridge," he said. "It's proof that second chances are real." I still work at the hospital. But I see people differently now. I know that every one of them is someone's future love, someone's hope, someone's home. One evening, we sat on the living room floor in the dark. Only streetlights cast soft shadows. "Do you think we found each other by accident?" he asked. I smiled. "No, I think we met when we were finally ready not to lose each other." Love isn't loud promises. Love is staying. When it's frightening. When it's quiet. When life isn't perfect. And if someone ever asks me what happiness really is, I won't say much. I'll say, it's a warm hand in the dark. A voice that brings you back to life. A home you don't have to search for. Because I found mine.